Well, welcome everybody. We are here at Hillcrest Online Cafe. I've got my coffee, and we have the Waddells here with us. And what do they got? They got some tea? Yes, awesome. They're ready to go. So recently, you guys have been missionaries over in the Philippines with your 4 children, and it's been quite an adventure. There's been more than one natural disaster, a world epidemic. Um, you guys have faced some interesting situations while you were there. So when you're in the Philippines, how did you react to the fact that there was a world pandemic going on?
I think partly we are on an island separate from the main island. So we were kind of in a bubble, to be honest, on that little island. And we're in a bubble most of the time. We homeschool, so our kids don't go in and out of the house a lot. And we're into the communities a lot. But to hear about it on the news and all of that, it didn't feel like it was having a real direct impact on us until we started to realize that our little island was starting to get some positive cases. But I think that made it seem really large for us too, because we've taken that trip from New Brunswick to that Panay Island, and it's like 14,000 kilometers away from home. It made it feel much larger because we know how long of a trip that is. It's can be 20 hours plus to travel that great of a distance. And so when I realized my parents in Norton, New Brunswick, were self-isolating, and one person was going out getting groceries, and we were doing the very same thing in Rojas City, Capiz, I was like, wow, this is really a worldwide pandemic, because I'm able to visualize that distance in my mind to know how far away we are from home. And so when it started to have that impact on our own island, that's when, for me anyway, that's when it felt much, much larger than just it being in Italy and China and, places that are somewhat close. But when you started hearing about little islands being affected as well, it was, I think for me.
Yeah, as Melanie pointed out, we don't live in Manila, the national capital region, where that's really where the sort of the epicenter of COVID-19 cases are in the Philippines. We don't live there. We live on a different island, and really that island is quite rural. It's a developing island. It's not the bustling megacity like Manila is. And so most days, as Melanie already said, we feel quite isolated being on that island, just because it is very rural. There's not Western sort of establishments and restaurants and stores and malls and that kind of thing. So when the pandemic did happen and the Filipino government made the decision to lock down Manila to keep the spread of the virus from going throughout the country, our provincial government on the island we were on made the same decision, basically to close all of their seaports, all of their airports, and any land travel. And so that really made it feel like, okay, we're
isolated.
We're on this island.
We're really isolated.
And, they're starting to talk about, goods not being able to get here, and essential services not being able to be provided for because they all come from the main island. So there was just a lot of things that really just sort of heightened the realization that we're in a pretty rural, developing kind of area, that we just had a lot of unknowns, about how things would pan out. And not being from there, it just raises all of that. Like we have a good support system there with our partners that check in on us and make sure things are all right, but they're comfortable in that environment because it's their natural environment, whereas for us it's not, right? So
I think, to put in perspective too, the city we live in is about the size of Sussex, New Brunswick, but it has the population of St. John in it.
Oh, double St.
John.
About 170,000 people.
Yeah, double St. John. So there you go. So it's crowded. Even though it's rural, it's still crowded, and it's Asia, so it's still overpopulated and that sort of thing. So yet we're in a gated subdivision where we have a gate. We're actually in a subdivision that a lot of overseas foreign workers have houses in, but they live abroad. And so we just happen to live in that subdivision. It's not very crowded. There's many houses in it, but there's a lot of families that aren't actually living in their home. They have other family members living in their home, taking care of the property. So it's actually quite quiet and private. But so that makes our bubble seem even more like a bubble too, because it's a quiet area that we're in. But
It's like being back in Norton or back at Camp
Yeah,
T.
no, it is. It really is in a way. It's true. It's just we're closer to the grocery store than we would be in Norton.
Now, June was coming anyway, so you guys were going to be coming home on assignment in June, but you came home in March. What kind of precipitated the move in your mind to move up the date earlier?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had it in our mind that even with the pandemic sort of arriving in the Philippines and a few cases popping up in our province, that we would likely just hang tight until our flight. We already had our flights booked in June, June 8th, I think it was, that we were scheduled to come home. So our plan was that we were just going to do that. But when Manila and the Philippine national government locked everything down and started to cancel all international flights and all of this, we started to realize that, well, there's a good chance that our June flight is going to be canceled and we wouldn't be able to go on home assignment. And so our home assignment was already scheduled. We have appointments, all over the place, and we'll talk about that later, maybe in another question. But so we were just kind of playing around, what should we do? And then we were talking, well, maybe if we can't go in June because it's canceled, maybe we'll have to just go in September when things open up again, if they are open up, or maybe we'll postpone by a year. So we just weren't sure. And then one day we were contacted by the Canadian Embassy in the Philippines, advising us and all Canadians really to return back to Canada, and
strongly encouraged. That's what they're.
Yeah, I mean they weren't forcing anybody, but they were basically saying, we advise strongly that you leave, that you go back to Canada. And then they said that they would be organizing dedicated repatriation flights. So we talked about it at that point and thought, well, gee, if our government is giving us this kind of advice and it is a worldwide pandemic, we probably need to at least discuss this and talk with our partners about it and talk with our office about it, just to have everything sort of out and talked about and prayed about and make the most wise decision, for our family. So we weren't sure, though, when the embassy was going to actually tell us these flights were. We thought, they could be a month from now, they could be whatever. But it was only maybe 2 days after that initial contact that we had from them that they called us, or not called us, they emailed us and said that the flights were planned, and it was the next week. We basically had 6 days to make the decision and to pack and to wrap up loose ends and all of that kind of thing.
They wanted us to give them the information because there's 7,100 islands in the Philippines. So there were other Canadians stranded on other islands. So they wanted us to send them all of our demographic information on what island that we were on, because they only had 5 or 6 flights that were going to sweep those islands. And so they wanted to know, okay, how many are in this region? How many are in this region? Where are they all? So that we can sweep them all to the main island to get them out of the country. So we had to send them our information so they knew where the closest airport would be, and whether or not they would choose our island. We still didn't actually know whether they were going to choose our island or not.
So in the end, they did choose our island, but the airport that they selected was in the capital city of our island, which is not the city we live in. It's 3 hours away, and it required us to drive through about 6 different municipalities and different checkpoints with health screenings and those kinds of things.
We had to get out of the vehicle and mask it up, check our fevers, military,
it was pretty insane. But thankfully, our embassy had made all those negotiations with all of the local government agencies. They provided us with an official embassy document stating that we were a Canadian family and that we were granted access basically through all of these points. And so we got to the airport. It's called Iloilo City. And so we got there, and we're on a smaller flight that then took us to Manila. And from there, we got on the larger flight, which we didn't know. We thought, how many Canadians are actually here? But the flight was completely packed, just, shoulder to shoulder. Every seat was full. And they ran 3 repatriation flights that same day, which was April the 14th. So it actually was just about 6 weeks earlier than when our original time to come home was. So we decided, and one of the factors, I guess, around why we decided to take it, aside from the embassy's strong advice that we felt we needed to pay attention to, part of our hesitation as a ministry couple serving there was, we didn't want our partners to feel like the first sign of trouble, our Canadian missionary family just sort of says, well, we're out of here, see you later, And so we were really concerned about that, because we've worked hard over the last 4 years of building strong partnership and strong relationships with our partners, and really trying to be there and stand in solidarity with them through times of trouble, being able to journey with them through kind of all the ebbs and flows of life. And so, we were just concerned about this. So we decided that that was really going to be the deciding factor for us, that if we talked to our partner and they were of the mind that we should stay, then we would probably listen to our partner, right? But so we had that call. It was a Skype call because, of course, we were in lockdown and nobody was allowed to leave their houses. And when we shared with our partners what was going on, what had been transpiring with the embassy, they had this kind of relief kind of sigh. And so we kind of pressed into that a little bit and, what's that about? And they said, well, we've been praying, that God would work somehow for you guys to be able to go back to Canada, because when you're here, we just feel completely responsible for you, for your safety, for your health, for all of your needs and stuff like that. And in this time of lockdown, in this pandemic, because we can't leave our house and because we can't do things, we feel like we can't care for you the way that we should be able to care for you. And you really, the best place for you would be home with your family so that you can take care of one another, just like we want our family here with us. And so when they unpacked that for us, it was just such a freeing kind of a conversation. We prayed together. They blessed us. We blessed them in terms of their staying in their communities and trying to meet the physical daily needs of people through this time. So,
and everything we were doing with them was just like this, or through, there was no hands-on piece in that last month. So like they even said to us, you can do what you're doing in Canada still. We can still feel supported by you, even if you're in Canada. You need to go to Canada. So that was really like a...
So, and we were unclear really, because the embassy said there was no guarantee, right? It was sort of a first come, first serve to get a seat on the plane. But so Melanie, as she said, we put in our information, and then they told us, okay, well, you have to call the airline and book the seats yourself, like give them all your passport information, all that. So we tried to do that the next day, and we waited on hold for about 2 or 3 hours, and every time I'd get disconnected. And so finally I just said, I'm leaving this with the Lord. If we're supposed to get a seat on this, somehow it's going to work out. They had said, an agent will call you back, but people were reporting, that's not happening.
Yeah, you could see it was a horror story on the Facebook embassy page. Everybody was just, they're never going to call you. This is a scam. We're like, okay, well.
But thankfully they did call us. They did take all of our information. We got our e-tickets emailed to us, and the embassy's information came on the letter to pass us through all the checkpoints. Really, as chaotic and as wild as the whole experience was, it couldn't have gone, couldn't have gone smoother. I mean, it was chaotic because it's,
And the other piece is what I find really neat. We could really feel people praying for us, because that trip, that long flight between Manila and Toronto is 14 and a half, 15 hours, depending on how, what great wind speed they receive. Or anyway, so the kids, we were on that flight, and everybody, all the flight attendants are in hazmat suits. We're all masked up, every single one of us. It's like it was a traveling hospital and we were in the ICU, no joke. Like we were all, except we weren't hooked up to oxygen, but it was pretty intense traveling that way. And they, our kids afterwards, they were like, what? When the pilot came on and said, we're preparing for our landing sort of thing. And the kids all were like, really? That was a short trip compared to other times, but it was the most stressful trip we've ever taken. And I just know people were praying that we would be relaxed, and we would, like, all of the, that we could sleep, that we could not focus on everything around us, because it was literally, for all 6 of us, the shortest flight we've ever taken that's been the long flight. And we've done that a few times. And that, for all of us, we were like, I cannot believe we're in Canada already. Like, it was really crazy, but because it's a long flight and you're cramped up and you want to get up and walk around. There's so many aches and pains your body goes through in that long span of a flight, but not at all this time. So it was really cool.
So it was, I was thinking about your kids. As parents, we sometimes shelter our kids from as much as we can, but were they relieved to come home? Were they feeling guilty about leaving? Or how are they dealing with that?
Well, our kids, so because we homeschool and we've tried to get them engaged in culture, and they come to some of our ministry projects, and they do have Filipino youth that are their friends, but they're not like classmates because they're homeschooled through Canadian curriculum online through Tree of Life homeschooling. And so they do a lot of Google Docs drops, and that's just how they roll every day. So they're working that way. That's their norm. And so, but they knew we were going home, and they did have some anxiety and fear that maybe we wouldn't get home. And so when we left it kind of being a couple of days where we talked to a girl that we knew could stay in our home and take care of our pets that she knew before our kids knew. I wanted to make sure she was okay with doing that. We talked to CBM, of course, and talked to them about all of this, and then we sat down with our kids and said, guys, this is kind of what's going on. We want you to know, and this is where we're at with it. And right now we've sent all of our demographic information in. And so we're not sure whether or not we're going to get on that flight, but we may. And so we just wanted you to be aware that it looks like we could be leaving in a week's time. And they were all actually quite ecstatic, because Michael and I come from two families that are really quite close. So with our family being so far away, our 4 kids, that's 4 of my parents' 8 grandkids. There are only 2 granddaughters are in my family. They have grandsons with my brother, and then and with Mike's family, it's 4 of theirs as well. And so for all of them, as soon as, we were texting our parents, of course, to get them to pray as we're assessing all of it. And they're like, I hope you get on that plane. They've been praying that something like this would come up for us. And so our kids too, we had to warn them that we were going to break out of our bubble. The kids and I had not been out of the house for 6 weeks. Mike was our person that had a pass to leave our subdivision, but I didn't have a pass. So I hadn't been out to see what outside the walls of our subdivision would be like, and neither had the kids. So when we left that morning for that flight, that was the first time in 6 weeks we had actually left our subdivision. So we had to kind of talk them through it, because we don't have the news over there. We have the radio and that sort of, so they weren't seeing masked faces, and they weren't seeing any of that. So we kind of had to unpack what the world's going to be like when we leave, because we're kind of pretty protected in our little bubble. And to be honest, if we weren't coming home, would we have? Maybe not, but maybe too, just based on how we were feeling around our anxieties. Like, that's kind of hard to assess. We just always had the thoughts of, well, okay, we've already got our home assignment completely booked. We probably should go. But at the same time, if it wasn't our home assignment year, would we have felt that same sort of pressure? I'm not sure that we would have. So we just, and our kids, we wouldn't have felt our kids saying things like, are we going to get to go home? They would have just known we weren't going home. So we wouldn't have felt that same kind of anticipation around going. So, yeah.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you guys have bubbled wisely. So you're living at Mike's parents' house. So
we're part of their family.
So now I'm guessing your bubble must be your parents. Is that?
Yes, my parents are our bubble.
So smart.
Yeah, we had to have a place to live. So first we quarantined, isolated at one of our supporters' homes. Bless their hearts. They went to their trailer and stayed in their trailer and blessed us with their home for 14 days. And we stayed there, and family members dropped groceries off to us. And we had very social distance visits for short times, but we didn't hug anyone or anything like that. And then when we discovered we were fine, then Mike's parents said, listen, you guys can come stay with us. We have room for you, because they still live in Mike's family home. And so there's space here for us. And my parents just moved out of our family home, and they're in the middle of a renovation of our family summer cottage being turned into their winterized 1-bedroom home. So they're kind of in transition as well. So when this whole bubble piece came about, we were sitting in the living room here at Mike's parents' place, and Mike's mom said, you're like our family, right? Because you're living with us now. So if we wanted to look at a bubble, we would be totally okay if our bubble was your parents, because Mike's parents and my parents are friends. So that's piece too. Like, my mom came over here for coffee and visited with us, but also visited with Mike's mom as well. So we said, great, that'll be awesome. So last night, the 6 of us went to my parents' house for supper. And so, yeah, it's been a good strategic bubble, so to speak.
Yeah. Although for our kids, they're really looking
Yeah.
forward to the
Oh,
bubble
yeah.
being able to be expanded
It's their
because
cousins. So
they haven't
much.
seen their cousins yet. So
Yeah.
they really are missing
Just
those
from a
opportunities.
distance.
Being this close, but still having that, sort of barrier, I guess, is just hard for them. But they understand it's necessary for them.
Yeah, we'll see what happens
Yeah.
today. We're interviewing today on the 8th. Blaine Higgs is supposed to be making some announcements about relaxing some of those things. So we'll pray that God will relax a little more so they can see some people and connect with some cousins.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Awesome. It really would be.
Yeah.
Because they're really missing our boy, Jamie's boys and our kids. When you look at the 8, there's just months between all of them. So they're like best friends / cousins, really. So they're really, really missing them because they don't see them normally anyway, and they're so far away. So it would be really nice for them to have kind of they play online games with them, but that's, it's not the same.
Yeah. So what's been your favorite part of being home this last while? What's been some of the blessings of being home?
Well, I'll make light of this for a minute, but for anybody in your congregation who knows Waddells, and I don't know that any of you can do, we really love potato chips. And in Asia, we can't get great potato chips.
No.
We can get like prawn chips and different things like that. So I've really been
Shrimp
enjoying
chips.
Humpty Dumpty potato chips. There's my vice,
Yes, that's true. I think it's different. It's a different time being home, of course. Like it's different for everybody. So that's been definitely. But I think food has been a highlight. Food we cannot receive get or buy or anything over there. With it. We've missed, comfort food. I remember there was one grocery order that a girlfriend of mine got for us when we were in isolation because she was really wanting to help, and so I gave her a list, and she said, Mel, like this is like there's a lot of comfort food on this order. I'm like, I know. I kept asking the kids, and they're like, Delicioso pizza, and Jane's chicken nuggets, and they're going on and all these things. And I was like, I know. I know we don't usually eat this.
Not the most healthy choices, for our diet. But for this little season, it's okay.
So that would definitely be, and then just having the people that we love the most in the world being so close is a real blessing because we're really isolated there. We are the only, our kids are the only Western that we're aware of, white Western children that live in that city. And so we're really quite, would be idolized, we're stared at, they're intimidated by us. There's a lot of, even our kids, so there's a lot of things that are like their new normal, but it's not normal, typical behavior that they would have with people in our own culture. And Filipinos are wonderful, wonderful people. It's just that we're a different culture and they love white skin. So they're very much like, wow, in awe of us all the time. So that's a challenging thing to sort of always have to know that every time we get out of our vehicle, we'll be stared at everywhere we go and that sort of thing. So it's nice to just blend in, even though there's not a lot to blend into because we're home, but it's just nice to just feel blended in with everybody.
Yeah, we'll just take 5 seconds. Everybody that's watching, just stare at the Waddells for a second. Yes, yes. Just to make it feel more like in the Philippines. So is there anything, just we're coming to the closure, is there anything that you guys would like to add? Anything that you'd like to say, especially your Hillcrest family? There's lots of other people that'll be watching this. But is there anything you want to add or think about or share?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the things that we would want to add or share or express is just our deep thanks and appreciation for the Hillcrest family's faithful prayers and support. We know that so many people have been praying for us and supporting us as we've been away and as we've been making this journey back to New Brunswick. And we wish that COVID wasn't going on and we would have the opportunity to be face to face and to be able to sort of express this in person, and maybe that'll come down the months, sort of as we move along here. But for now, we'll take this opportunity through a video screen to just say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We love you guys. We appreciate so much your support, and just pray that God would continue to bless you guys as you serve people of St. John and West St. John.
Yeah, and I too, our ministry partners praying for their ability to remain sustainable there. And because just as the numbers that are being reported in the Philippines are not really always correct. And so our island is fairly safe, but like the main island, Manila, there's not a lot of tests being done, and unfortunately there's some of the elderly people are actually dying before they find out they're positive for COVID. So there's a lot of that stuff that's not reported, and so that our communities would remain healthy and stable, and that they would feel like they can reach out when they need to, even though we're so far away, that we could figure out ways that our ministry partners could work alongside of them, even from a distance. And that hunger is real there, that people without jobs aren't able to provide for their families, just like here. But the reality is there's not a lot of support systems to help them. And so when they're hungry. And so just that our, the whole CBM's, COVID intervention, and on behalf of the projects all around the world, that things would be sustainable and be able to outlast all.
We actually, before returning to Canada, we had a number of locals that we work with in different communities share with us that for them, that they didn't feel the greater threat to their health and safety was actually COVID-19.
Yeah, that's right.
The greater threat was actually hunger.
Hunger,
because they saw how this was going to shake out, and as things locked down, as businesses closed, as day workers could no longer earn their wage for that day, they just recognized that hunger will become a real issue, and people will die because of hunger before they will die because of COVID. So those are just sort of realities of that part of the world. And
I was just going to add to that, it's not even just hunger, but they also, instead of going to a drugstore and buying a jar of pills because you have a heart condition, they go day by day and buy their pill meds. Like each day they go to, because they live day by day. That's kind of how they're paid, day by day workers. So their health can also be very affected, because if they're not making any money, they can't go to the drugstore to buy the medication they may need to be on for that day. And so it's not just nutrition and being able to eat, but it's like they could die for other reasons, because they're not able to actually get the medicine that they need to survive. So.
And maybe if there's just one last thing that I can share with the Hillcrest family here is, many people in the few weeks that we've been back now have either messaged us, or if we've been speaking with them through something like this, they've said to us, well, what are your plans now? Like, you're on home assignment, but you're not able to actually travel and visit churches yet. So what are you doing? So I guess we'll just express this to say our intention at this point is to try to keep our home assignment schedule virtually. So as much as possible, the Sunday mornings, the Sunday nights, the midweek things that we have booked with churches all across the Maritimes and into Ontario, we hope to be able to continue to do that through creative online engagements. So whether it's through these type of recorded interviews, or whether it's through us recording greeting messages, those types of things. So we plan to do that. Hopefully, we're hoping that New Brunswick and possibly PEI and other parts of the country may start to relax enough that we'll be able to do some face-to-face visits in the later months of summer and fall. Our original plan was actually to go back to the Philippines at the end of September. That was our date. At this point, we don't have a return flight booked because it's just too uncertain at this point in time whether international travel will even be happening at the end of September, whether the pandemic will be under control, will there be a vaccine? When you read the news, probably not. So there's just a lot of unknowns there. But our plan is to return to the Philippines when it is safe for us to do so as a family, to continue what God's called us there to do. So I guess we would just really covet your prayers in that, because it is a kind of an unsettling place to be as a family, even for our kids. Like, to not know, like we have ourselves planned to the end of September, so we're good with that. But when we start to let our minds drift beyond that, it just gets really kind of unnerving. And what will it look like if we can't go back? What will we do? How will we continue to support our partners? How will we continue to, keep the ministry there moving forward, and not having people,
paying rent in 2 locations,
there's
all
just
that stuff that's like
a lot of things. So
it's a lot of stuff that's kind of.
Anyway, we leave that with the Lord. So we'll try not to stress about it.
Well, Lord's had his hand on you from the very beginning,
Amen.
continually to walking through these different processes. And one thing we know for sure is that when one door closes, and it seems like the right one, another one opens. And sometimes, to our surprise, it's sometimes, we've passed some tests, and God brings us to something new that's we never thought that would ever be an option. So we're just going to continue to trust and pray for you guys.
Yeah.
But because you're our guests, we're going to ask you if you wouldn't mind praying both for us, but you've really touched our heartstrings. I would say Hillcrest is a mission-minded church, and we'd like to be praying for your mission partners over in the Philippines. I don't know if there's other field workers that have remained on site around the world, or if they've all come home, or how that
Yes.
works. They've all come home, okay. But even for
No, they're all many of, yeah,
oh,
many
sorry,
have
say it
stayed.
again.
Just with us, we're the only ones in the Philippines, but many have stayed in other places all over the world.
Right. Okay. So maybe we could ask you to pray for some of those things, and just as the Lord leads, and then we'll kind of close out, and I'll tell people some things that are going on. But that'd be great if you guys could pray for us.
Sure.
Sure.
You want to do that? You start, and then I'll finish.
Okay. Father God, I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with Andrew and to share our hearts around this experience that we've had in regards to our transition here home to Canada. We thank you for your hand of protection upon us as an entire family, and we thank you for the prayers of the people, such as the congregation of Hillcrest, and how we have felt your presence, and we're so very blessed by you, knowing that you love us, that you go before us, that you have a plan for us. And just as Andrew shared, when you close doors, you open other ones, and some things we least expect. And so we kind of had it all planned out, but you have something maybe else planned that maybe will return later, and there's reasons for that. And so we just have to trust you in that. We just pray for Hillcrest and for all of the needs within that congregation for this whole pandemic and the impact that it's had on the individual people and within the congregation. For even there may be people that are home alone and they don't have contact to the outside world just through times such as this. I just pray for your hand of protection upon their minds and their hearts. And I just often think around this time around mental health and awareness around that, and anxiety and depression, and when stuff is so very unknown around the future, we just pray for your hand of protection upon each person within the congregation, and that if there's any thoughts or feelings or ideas that are not from you, that they would claim their victory in Jesus Christ, knowing that you are there for them, knowing that you can help them shift their negative thoughts to positive thoughts, because you are the God of positivity. You're not the God of negativity. And so we're so grateful for that, for the love that you bestow upon us as your people and as your children. And so I just pray for each one of them, for the sick, for the shut in, for the elderly, for all that are being affected, that you would just wrap your loving arms around them, hold them close, whisper in their ears in those times when they feel really lonely and anxious. And I pray around all the bubbling that's happening, that there's no offenses within families, but that people can just work together as families and bubble strategically in ways that allow for really good wellness within families too. And I just thank you, God, for being with us, for protecting us. We know that you have a plan in the midst of this whole worldwide pandemic, and we're seeing fruit of that in countries in the world. We're seeing fruit of that in our own lives, just as we daily ask ourselves, dear Lord, what are you trying to teach me in the midst of this? And so we just pray that you would help each one of us to be, to listen to your still small voice and to be obedient to what you're asking us to do in the midst of this time that's so uncertain. In your name.
Yeah, and God, we just want to pray for Canadian Baptist Ministries and for their ministry around the world on behalf of Canadian Baptist. And Lord, although it looks very different right now, as people are mostly working from their homes through computer screens and just trying to do what they can to support ministry efforts, we just want to lift them up to you, lift up Canadian Baptist Ministries leadership as they just sort of navigate through these unprecedented and challenging times, as they continue to look for new ways and creative ways to support our global partners. Lord, we want to pray for global field staff, who have remained in their country of service where there's lower cases of COVID. We want to pray for national field staff who are in their home countries serving on behalf of Canadian Baptists. We want to pray for our global partners around the world who are seeking every day to just live out the gospel and to demonstrate the gospel through acts of kindness and through just really addressing the physical daily needs of people who are really hurting right now in the midst of this pandemic. God, we want to think specifically of the Philippines and our partner there, Kabuganaan Philippine Ministries, for their leadership through Reverend Hope Santiago and his wife Phoebe, and all the various people that are involved in ministries that we are a part of and that we love. We just pray that you would be with them in this time, that you would continue to use them to respond to needs and to really just be kingdom bearers and ones who are just proclaiming and demonstrating your love and your gospel in these desperate times. Lord, we are thankful just for this opportunity to share, for this opportunity to be together apart with our Hillcrest Baptist family. We just pray your special blessing upon each one of them and Pastor Andrew as he continues to care for them during this time. We pray this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Melanie. This has been just a wonderful time to hear your heart and to hear about your family. And I know I felt such relief when I heard the news you guys are coming home. I'm so thankful you guys are safe, and I look forward to seeing what God does in your family, through your family, and just as God continues to work in the Philippines through the seeds you've planted, through the relationships you've developed. We know that God takes our meager gifts and makes them grow and does things with them that we could never expect. So we'll just be trusting for great things to be happening for you all. And thank you everybody for joining us for Hillcrest Online Cafe. You can check out other interviews on it's HillcrestSJ.ca. That's our new website, and all sorts of interviews are there. Every Sunday morning at 10:30, we post our service. Every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we have a Bible study. Every Thursday at 2 o'clock, that's when we post our Hillcrest Online Cafe. And every Friday evening at 7 o'clock, we have Facebook Live prayer. And you're welcome to join us for any of those things. And so once again, thank you, Mike and Melanie. Lord bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you. And we'll talk to you at a later date, face to face.
Yeah.
Hopefully at a Camp Tulakadik fundraiser somewhere.
Yeah.
Woo!
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. And if you'd like to follow the Waddells, you can go to their website at Waddells, Waddells.ca, Waddells.ca, and you'll have all sorts of updates there.